Welcome to the Book Binge. I'm your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and today is part 1 of my 2025 reading tier list video, another year-end wrap-up. Continuation, basically. You know, just as with the last few years, I am going to be ranking every book that I read last year, and greatly looking forward to doing it this year because thankfully in this case, I don't actually have that much to talk about because I didn't read that much in 2025. You know, in the previous few years, I had read, around 45 books per year. In 2025, I only read about 25 books. So, definitely going to only be a two-parter this time, so this week and next Thursday as well will be the two parts of this reading tier list compared to, the 3 to 4 of these episodes that I did for the last few years, and the last few of them have been quite long. So we'll see how long these end up being, but I don't really have much else to say. I have a few volumes of a manga to talk about, and then the first 12 books that I read in 2025. So let's go ahead and jump right into the video. Head over to my desktop here and like I said, get into it. So the first thing that we're going to talk about here is Monster, the manga that I was reading at the end of 2024 and finished at the start of 2025. In 2024, I read the first few arcs of the series, which comprised basically the first 4.5 volumes. So the rest of the series is the last 4.5 volumes. So just bear in mind that in the 2024 tier list ranking, I included volume 5 within that ranking. And so this year I'm going to include not volume 5, even though the back half of volume 5 is part of the arc that I'm going to be talking about just now. All technical stuff, but the back half of Volume 5 and most of Volume 6 made up the Prague arc of Monster and was incredible. Just to jump right into it, I think Volume 6 is my second favorite volume of Monster. Just absolutely incredible. The Prague arc is maybe my favorite arc outside of Volume 1, because Volume 1 was my favorite thing within Monster. Don't have anything else to say other than the Prague arc was incredible. Volume 7, the Arrestment arc, what followed, was a little bit rough around the edges, I gotta say. It was good, it was fine, it was solid, but overall there were some issues with it. The build-up of the arc was pretty good, but most of the end of Volume 7, as it's transitioning into Volume 8, there's a lot of jumping back and forth between different POVs and other stuff going on that gets really confusing, and I don't think ended up really working out the best in my opinion. Still thought it was good, but wasn't the best. Volume 8, however, the Frankfurt arc was also cream of the crop stuff, genuinely just incredible. Really loved Volume 8. I don't remember it a whole ton, but it was super solid. I think it was my third favorite volume in the series. I think volumes 1, 6, and 8 were the only ones that I gave 5 stars. I think whatever ranks below that was 4.5 or below. So, that puts things into perspective. I think Volume 9 was one that I gave 4.25. It was pretty good. I really enjoyed that as well. But there were a couple decisions that I remember from that last volume, even though, again, I don't remember Volumes 8 and 9 very much because I plowed through them. Volume 9 did have a couple decisions that I wasn't fully sold on, including the very end, that I'm still a little bit conflicted on. I do want to reread Monster just to see how it is that I end up feeling in the grand scheme of things. But this is where I would put those manga. Now on to the actual 12 books that I read in 2025. Or rather, the first 12 books. Starting off with a short story collection, actually. That is The Demigod Files by Rick Riordan. I was starting to read some Rick Riordan stuff in 2025. Would have liked to get through some more, but just ultimately didn't end up getting to it. Didn't have enough time. Just trying to decide where I would put, the Demigod Files. I'll probably put it rough around the edges, I guess. But I'll put it near the top of that because it's solid. There are a few short stories in there that are really good. I think I like the Demigod Files more than the Demigod Diaries, for example. But as far as Percy Jackson stuff goes, you don't really need to read any of that side material to really understand much. There's some stuff that's in there that's worth reading. Actually, I'm going to put this at the bottom of pretty dang good, come to think, because the Demigod Files is solid. Some of the stories that are in there are good. And more importantly, don't really conflict with any of the timeline or anything like that. It's solid. If you like Percy Jackson enough to read the side material, I recommend it, but by no means a required reading. My next read in 2025 was The Aeneid, and that is better luck next time. I should get rid of this bottom row because I don't need it. I did not enjoy the Aeneid very much, and I talked about this in my top 5 books plus bottom 2 of 2025 video, where basically, I think most of my issue with the Aeneid was the translation. I did not get along with Fagel's writing within that. Like, when I'm reading poetry, even if it's epic poetry, even if it doesn't rhyme or anything like that, I expect some amount of it to be, like, beautiful or to strike in some way that is poetic. The Aeneid just did not do that. And then there's also a lot of, like, structural things about it that I was not into. There were some books in there that was really great, but others that just bored me to tears, basically. So the Aeneid was just not for me. It was one of my biggest disappointments of the year, especially considering how much I loved reading the Iliad and the Odyssey back in 2022. Next up is the Congo, or just Congo by Michael Crichton, which I am going to put in pretty dang good, and I will, I'll go ahead and put it here under Monster, and that is because Congo, for the first, like, I don't know, 4/5 of it, incredible book, really great, loved it, loved everything that it was doing. The climax is very rushed though, and it just kind of ends in the middle of it, and that is a big bummer. I think that if that book had more to it, if it didn't end in the middle of the climax, like if it actually finished that sequence, got those characters back to a place of safety rather than ending off with them like just barely taking off, basically, like in the middle of the escape. It was a really weird decision. If it had like actually gotten them to a point of safety, and then more especially if the epilogue, instead of being like 2 pages telling you where all those characters are after a few years following the events, if it was like its own section, kind of like any of the other sections of the book, and each character had a couple pages all their own to explain where they were, you would have had a very solid climax and, more importantly, resolution there. But as is, the end of Congo was just really rough. It wasn't really an ending, you know, so it was very disappointing in that regard, even though so much of the book was incredible. Demigod Diaries, however, I will put in rough around the edges. I remembered liking Demigod Diaries more than Demigod Files, but unfortunately a couple of stories that are in there like kind of conflict with some of the timeline related stuff in ways that are like, this should not have been allowed to happen, Rick. And there's also a story in there by his son, which is arguably the best thing in the collection, actually. But the Demigod Diaries is just kind of rougher than Demigod Files. It's not as focused. It tries to be like a frame. Both of them try to be a little bit of a frame in a certain way, but Demigod Diaries kind of like abandons that framing because of the fact that it includes a story by Rick Riordan's son. It's just a little bit weird. Like, it's fine, you know, again, if you really like the Percy Jackson universe, you should read it probably because it's got some enjoyable moments in there, but there's a lot about it that's also like really rough. So it is what it is. Red Rabbit, however, is cream of the crop. It is one of my favorite things that I have read, especially in 2025. Am I going to put this above or below volume 6 of Monster? I mean, considering that it's the whole prog arc of Monster that I'm ranking up there. That was incredible. I'll go ahead and put it below, but that's just a technicality. Red Rabbit, very, very good book. If you want a supernatural Western horror novel, incredible. It does all of the things exactly the way that I wanted and enjoyed, and just overall was very, very satisfying in its conceit, the way that it handles some of the supernatural elements like ghosts and spirits and stuff like that. Just the journey that the characters go on, the relationships that they build. A lot about Red Rabbit was very, very satisfying to me. It just really clicked for me. I don't know how to explain why I liked it that much. It's just really good. So if you're in for something supernatural horror, if you're into something Western horror or something like that, definitely check it out. It is worth reading. A Crown of Swords, book 7 of the Wheel of Time. And we'll be talking about Wheel of Time a lot in these couple of videos. Actually, most of it's going to be in the next video, come to think. I would say that Crown of Swords is pretty dang good, and I'll put it at the top of pretty dang good. That's because it's very solid. You know, most of that book is reacting to the end of book 6, and does so in very solid, very satisfying ways. Really enjoyed a lot of that material. The end, the climax is a little bit disappointing, like it's a little bit anticlimactic to a certain degree, and also pretty sudden as well, because you have the book doing this thing, and then all of a sudden Rand decides, we're going to go do this thing now, and then it just happens, and it's like, done. You know, typical Robert Jordan rushed climax, but overall, I really enjoyed A Crown of Swords. Certainly not anything that I would, you know, consider a slog. If you're going to talk about the slog arc of the series, which I consider to be books 7 through 11, book 7 is not a slog. It is great. I actually really enjoyed it. Next up is The White Country, which I will also put, you know, up at pretty dang good, and I'll go ahead and put it at the top of pretty dang good because it really, really surprised me. It's a book whose conceit, in the 2020s, you could see that and being like, oh wow, this is probably going to be pretty heavy-handed and preachy and not great. But it was actually really great. I only read that book because it was a physical arc that was provided to me, so I should clarify that. But I actually really enjoyed that book. It did a lot of things in ways that I actually really enjoyed. I respect a lot of what it was doing. I don't fully agree with some of the things that it does, but the way that it explores its story and its main character and its main character's place within, the plot and the town, more specifically where everything's going down, I think it is super solid. The fact that it doesn't give in to just being preachy nonsense that you might expect from something published in the 2020s about its concept, it does handle that content actually really well. So I was very surprised by it. Mickey 7, I'm going to go ahead and put at the top of Rough Around the Edges. That was a book that we read in the Red Company for a read-along. Red Company is the Sun Eater fan Discord. And the book was solid. We read it ahead of Mickey 17, which is the film adaptation. And Mickey 7 was pretty okay. It was good. I enjoyed it for what it was. It just kind of lacked depth, and there were also a couple of decisions in there that were a little bit silly. It's one of those like Andy Weir type of sci-fi books. If you like The Martian or Project Hail Mary or even Artemis, Mickey 7 is kind of in that vein. It's just like, a step below that in terms of I guess how complex it is. It's one of those things where if it didn't have any language or any sexual content, you could almost give that to a middle grader. But it's solid. It's like definitely baby's first sci-fi, where Andy Weir is already baby's first sci-fi. Mickey 7 is okay, just not super impressive. It's just good, basically, is where I fall on it. A Tale of Two Cities is also, this is one that, if I'm going to rate it in terms of like how good it is, it should be somewhere in between here and Pretty Dang Good and Rough Around the Edges. I'm going to go ahead and put it at the top of Better Luck Next Time. But that comes with the clarifier, the little asterisk of, I did not dislike this. I was a little bit disappointed by it. But it's not down here because I disliked it. It's because I definitely need to reread this at some other point in time, because I just don't really remember it, and it wasn't an experience that was very memorable for me at the time that I was reading it. Life was chaotic. There was a lot going on. I was so busy with a bunch of things, and overall, I just don't really recall the experience very much. I can remember certain scenes from the book, and I remember what I do remember I enjoyed, like I enjoyed the book. I think I gave it 4 stars. Like I think I gave it like a 3.5 and rounded it up or something like that. But A Tale of Two Cities is definitely a book that I plan to reread at some point to try to appreciate it more, because I just did not get as much out of this as I feel like I should have. And the fact that I basically don't remember it is pretty indicative of that. I think that is certainly the case. So Better Luck Next Time, because I absolutely plan to reread A Tale of Two Cities at some point to enjoy it more. But if I were to give it a more proper rating, I would put it, I guess, at the top of Rough Around the Edges or at the bottom of Pretty Dang Good, because I enjoyed it, but I don't remember it enough to really say why, I guess. It's a little bit confusing, so that's where I put it. Next up is Path of Daggers, which I'm going to put at the bottom of Pretty Dang Good, which might be a hot take, and that is because Path of Daggers, despite being the weakest book in the Wheel of Time up to that point, I had a lot of fun with it. The climax is very messy. It does things in different ways than I think you would expect, and I wasn't super into what those things were, but overall I remember plowing through Path of Daggers. I think I read through that book in like 2 weeks, or maybe even a tiny bit less than 2 weeks, which might be the fastest that I've read a Wheel of Time book outside of The Dragon Reborn. So I got through that really quickly, really enjoyed my time with it, had a lot of fun with it. I almost remember it more fondly than I do A Crown of Swords. Like, I arguably enjoyed it more, but on an objective level, I know that it is messier, so I'm putting it at the bottom of Pretty Dang Good, even though realistically it should be Rough Around the Edges, but I just remember enjoying, especially like the first like 3/4 of that book so dang much, and reading it so quickly that like I'm giving it the extra bump because I can, and because this is my list. Next up, we're going to go into my reread of Empire of Silence. my third time reading this book. I don't remember for sure where I put this my last couple times I ranked it, but I think when I reread it in 2023, shortly after having finished Ashes of Man, which was the latest book in the series at that point, I think I put it near the top of Rough Around the Edges because it was like, it was a reread. I appreciated it more, but, it was still Empire of Silence, still my least favorite book in the series. And like, yeah, it's still Empire of Silence. It's still my least favorite book in the series. But this time we're coming in the context of the Diamond Edition, the High Matter edition, the Andorida edition, the updated version of it. I did a recopy edit of this, actually, and helped to clean it up a bit. And I gotta say, Empire of Silence is actually a masterpiece. It's still the weakest book in the Sun Eater, but being able to experience it with some of those minor tweaks and updates, and especially since when I reread this was after I had been able to read through Disquiet Gods at that point, the amount of extra context that even just that one extra book gives, and in hindsight, Shadows Upon Time, the 7th book, which was the next thing I read immediately after I copy edited Empire of Silence, and no, I hadn't done Howling Dark yet because that's later in the list. But having done Empire of Silence, Shadows Upon Time was the next thing that I read, and I read that in just a couple weeks, which was also super quick. I'll go ahead and put Shadows Upon Time at the top of cream of the crop here. Just the way that Empire of Silence is expanded by the other books 6 and 7, somehow, despite those books being impossible to exist the way they do without certain other things in the series happening, like the split of book 4 that made it books 4 and 5, for example. It's just insane how much Christopher was able to foreshadow in Empire of Silence. Like, it is absolutely mind-boggling, and I loved being able to work on that and being able to reread it, and I especially loved being able to read Shadows Upon Time. I got that a handful of months early before its release. Basically, it was the pre-copy edited version of it, but like the final edit had gone through, and I got the manuscript. I got it as a Word file, actually. I didn't even get it as like a PDF or anything. I got it as a Word file. So that goes to show how early I was able to read Shadows Upon Time. It was great. Favorite book of the year, easily, so that's a little bit of a spoiler about how some of the rest of this list is going to end up looking. I really, really, really loved that book, and it made me feel in such a way that I can't actually properly rate the series at this point. I thought I would rate all of the books in the Sun Eater once I got done with it, but it's like, I think I need to finish rereading the series before I actually know how everything's ranked. But it was very satisfying. I really liked it as a conclusion. I think it did all the things that it needed to, and in the only way that it could have, and it left me utterly bereft. That was the word that I used for it, and it was incredible. But that is going to be the end of this first part of the tier list. Come back next week, and we will talk about the other manga that I read part of, that I got through the very end of December, basically, and then the other 13 books that I read in 2025. So if you're excited to see how the rest of this list is going to look, check back in next week. But for now, I've been your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and I hope to see you guys in that next video.